Attlus the Conqueror is in the DorkLair! Welcome to another DorkLair action figure review. Today I'm taking a look at the Mythic Legion's Attlus the Conqueror. This is from the All-Stars 2.0 wave that was recently just came in stock, and the figure was originally a part of the very first wave of figures. He's actually the leader of his Legion, the House of the Noble Bear, sort of the barbarians and the animals and all the kind of beast guys. Originally, the story goes that he was the brother of the leader of the army of Odysseus, and there was some sort of falling out, and he formed his own legion called the Noble Bear. And so I think he's actually known as the Noble Bear, according to his bio, unless I'm kind of misreading it. But pretty cool to have a leader of a legion, Attlus the Conqueror, and he's very barbarian-esque with a sort of a mismatched armor, got that shirtless look, big belt and loincloth there. So this is a really cool release. I'm happy to have it in my collection. It was one of those figures that you just couldn't really get at this point, but now that it's out there in the 2.0 wave, I think it is starting to sell out. So if you want one, you might want to look around. But it's a really great figure, and I'm happy to have it in my collection. Let's get into this review. Like all Mythic Legions, this one comes in a collector-friendly packaging with the slide-out base at the bottom. Like the card back kind of slides out, and then you can slide it back in. So it makes it really easy to, put these back in. On the side, you've got a bio of the character right there. On the back, some information about Four Horsemen, about the world of Mythos, and, some characters on there from the original waves. And then on this side, you have the logo of the House of the Noble Bear. All right, so looking at the paint sculpt and details, this head sculpt really is a masterpiece. I mean, just look at the detailed hair sculpted in, paint wash, giving it a nice gritty, realistic look to that hair. And then he's got some ties or like bands holding those braids together over there. There's one like in there a little bit. So this is a really cool head sculpt. You can see the top. That's like a separate piece, and there's a band in there giving it some more detail. His face, you can see he took a slash to the eye, to his right eye, and, his eye is gone. It's all completely whited out, and he's got a scar there to show it. And then his face looks very weathered and wrinkled and like he's seen some action. So this is a great head sculpt. They have used this one again on their He-Man tribute figure, Atamon. And so you can see a different painted version of this head if you pick up that figure as well, which is really cool. My whole figure is a little loose. Like this joint is not quite fitting right. It doesn't affect posing. It just feels a little loose. And then this joint here is a little loose too. Probably talk about that a little more in the articulation. His body uses, kind of like the standard shirtless mold. I think a lot of the orcs and things are using this same mold as well. You can see there are holes in the back. So, unless you have something on there like the armor or something, it's going to look a little weird from the back, obviously. I do feel like maybe looking at like other pictures of this, I feel like his torso and his arm and then maybe his legs a little bit seem a little like plasticky, they have a little shine to them. I'm kind of debating maybe spraying it with a little matte finish clear spray paint just to see if I can get that shine down a little. I'm not sure how I feel about that shine. I feel like the figures I've seen in hand for other collectors for like the original one maybe don't look quite as sort of plasticky and shiny like that. This arm over here is a darker gray metal, or darker silver, I should say. And it's got sort of the typical knight sculpt, where if this were a knight, you'd have all of these little details painted and stuff, but this is just supposed to be a really like gritty, almost like, feels like his armor is thrown together, because if you come over to this side, the gauntlet is actually nicer. It's like silver, like he took it off some knight on the battlefield, and it's got some detailed paint to it, cobbled together kind of armor look to him. So if you look closely, you can see this is a very shiny silver, and this is almost like a gunmetal sort of grayish silver. And a real highlight of this figure is this entire like belt situation, where he's got like this belt and skirt with all these straps coming down. I'm not sure how much it's coming across, but there is a wash on there. It's just looks very, it looks very leathery. And then you have like the fur underlining of the whole thing that's also painted nicely. It's sort of like this red fur. It doesn't quite match here to here because this is like the separate piece here. This is like a loincloth that pegs into his pelvis there. And then just look at that belt buckle with the green skull. Mine's painted pretty well. I have a little bit of paint coming down off the bottom there, but that's hardly noticeable. And a couple other details throughout there. And then the loincloth itself, very rich red with a black wash to give it that weathered, worn look to it. And it has these straps sculpted in, hanging down with these rings and buckles and things like that. The boots pretty much match the one fully armored arm with the same kind of color. A very gritty kind of metal, not like a knight in shining armor type of metal, but you can see down here, very aggressively sculpted detail in these boots, massive clunkers of feet that, you wouldn't want to be stomped on by those boots. Alrighty, bringing in a few other figures. So a couple of the other recent pickups videos I've had. So first off, here is the 2.0 body. This is the Frost Elf Phelan Frostbow next to the 1.0 Attlus figure. And then here is Ragna. She's basically like a female dwarf, and she's also a member of the House of the Noble Bear. And moving on to a couple others. So we have the Kawaros Masters of the Universe tribute figure. We also have, moving into some other lines, here's a Stormtrooper from the movie Realization line, and I think he actually scales pretty well right there. And something that's a little bit bigger, Marvel Select Thor over here. And finally, the Mezco 112 Collective Fall Fashion Spock, which is actually a Daredevil figure with Spock's head, and then a custom Joker coat that I just threw on there to try it on because I'm waiting on my Joker. I'm going to pick up that Joker figure, and that's a coat I bought for it. So yeah, so some size comparison so you can see how he scales with some other lines here. And for accessories, he comes with two pauldrons. The first one is this more knight-like, very refined sort of piece of shoulder armor, and then he's got this other more aggressive, almost orc-like one that kind of goes on his mechanical arm. I'm calling it a mechanical arm because just the way it looks over, just coming right out of his skin like that when he doesn't have the pauldron on, makes me think it's like this magical arm or something like that. But it's probably just supposed to always have this piece of armor on there, so it looks like he's actually just got armor on that arm. But anyway, so this one's got a little bit of detail painted on that spike on the front and on the back right there. So pretty cool pieces. Again, with the cobbled together kind of armor style, it definitely feels very barbarian to have those two different shoulder armors. And then he's got this axe, which actually looks really nice. I feel like he took it off a dead body of a knight or something, because it's got like almost gemstone-esque green tips here. It's also got some pieces where things can come off. Actually, this is super loose right here. This comes off very easily. And then this tip comes off as well. And then this piece comes off too. And it's got a second half that you can pop right on there. One thing about this figure is everything feels loose on this thing. It's not a big deal. Doesn't bother me that much. But, it is a very loose kind of figure, from the joints to the modular weapons and stuff like that. Also comes with a very basic but very nice looking sort of long sword here. And then finally he's got a dagger right there. He does not come with any sort of extra head or helmeted head or anything like that, but I think that's partly because the head he does come with is such a intricately painted kind of thing. And that's pretty much it. I think this might be the first figure that did not come with the shoulder strap, the strap that goes around the shoulder that you can store weapons on. I don't remember a figure ever not coming with it, so maybe they just left mine out. I'm not sure. They sometimes forget accessories. Like, I don't have her fur, so sometimes I'm not even sure if I'm missing something. Like, I don't know if this guy's missing anything, but he seems to be missing the shoulder strap, which, not a big deal. I have like 30 of them, so I don't really care, but I'm not sure if he's supposed to have anything else that I'm not aware of, because they've been kind of, a little QC with missing parts lately. All right, and finally for the articulation, the one thing about this awesome head sculpt that really kind of stinks is it just completely limits what it can do in terms of articulation. He can look up that far and down that far. That's really it. He can kind of go side to side. Thankfully, these braids are actually a little bit softer. So if you want, you can kind of move them. They'll move aside if you want to put them side to side. So at least he can do that, but he can't look up or down really. So there's that. Also, like I said earlier, everything's very loose on this guy. This head sculpt is, the ball joint is just super loose. I don't really care though, because it'll hold a position wherever you put it. It's going to stay. It's just a little bit loose. I don't really care, and it's easy to tighten something like that up. And then okay, so into the arms, his arm can rotate up about that far. These 1.0 bodies are pretty limited in articulation. Bringing it back down, the elbow can come this far, and his arm will swing pretty much all the way around. And then there's a swivel at the top of the elbow, and then there's a swivel also at the gauntlet there, and the wrist will swivel all the way around, and it has a hinge. And then the same thing on this arm, up that far. It'll articulate probably about the same, very similar articulation. And then there's a swivel at the elbow, swivel at the gauntlet, and then the same kind of hand articulation. So very similar, even though the arms are different parts. And then the waist, he can crunch forward this far, and he can crunch back that far. You do sometimes see a little gap there, but you can finagle it. And again, kind of loose here with that joint. But same thing, doesn't really bother me too much. What can sometimes bother me is when these hips are very loose and you stand him in a wide stance, and then he just like automatically spreads. But this guy does not have that problem, at least not yet. So for the leg articulation, he can pretty much do the splits out as far as you would need him to go. He's got a swivel up at the top of the thigh. His knee can go to 90 degrees like this. His hips can kick forward this far, back that far. There is a swivel at the knee, and then there's a swivel at the feet can rotate all the way around. And then they have that angled rocker, as well as the ability to point down this far and then up this far. Yeah, the leg articulation is, I'm usually pretty happy with the way the legs can articulate. They can get into some pretty cool poses, but it's usually the arms where I sometimes wish they had double jointed elbows so that you can get them into some two-handed poses and whatnot. But this guy is awesome. I'm super happy to finally have this in my collection. It's one of those ones where it's nice that they put them back out on the All-Stars wave. That'll pretty much wrap up this review. Speaking of All-Stars, in the comments below, let me know what you think you'd like to see Four Horsemen reissue back into an All-Stars 3.0 wave. I know myself and a lot of others would like to see them redo Rhaegor, and possibly some of those other Colosseum wave figures. Those seem to be really hard to find, like the Colosseum orc, or really in general any of the green orcs are really hard to find at this point. So let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out my other videos and to follow me on Instagram at @DorkLair. And until next time, may the Force be with you. DorkLair!